Stadtfilter. This is BREiTZEiT. BREiTZEiT bring you tonight. We have another caller from New Delhi. This time it's a call from Delhi, but not by an Indian. It is Claus Dettelbacher. Claus is a writer and also philosopher and revolutionary from New Delhi. We have him here tonight. Forgive him, maybe he's also already a little bit tired because it is very late in the evening there in the Bharat, in the capital. So I tell you one thing. Claus writes, "I never wanted to get into politics, but somehow they overstretched it. There comes a point when every citizen has to step in." This is his initial statement. This is why he has written this book. The book is titled The Pre-Revolution Handbook, and that goes on in governments, in big corporations, in religions, everything. This is a wake-up call. You can hear this. There is a lot of information, and it is also a huge resume of the whole alternative thinking community all over the world. So I'm very honored we have him here. He will call us here in around about 3 minutes. And I just, to give you an impression, something he writes, hold on.
BREiTZEiT, at least 10% highly scholar, valuable, good, wicked stuff.
Absolutely. And we are bringing to you Claus Dettelbacher. And he says, it is not possible not to act. Though I am anything but a fan of Aristotle, I will give you some subdivisions of the various forms of acting and non-acting to ponder. First, you can continue silping and will not know, but still act subconsciously. Second, you can consciously refuse to act, since obviously truth and world affairs are so complicated and confusing. And three, you can refuse to act on still a higher level, as epitomized by Gandhiji, the role model. I hope, will be at the core of the next revolution in the West. It means active passivity through non-cooperation. However, that is only half the deal. Fourth, you can act consciously and positively by educating and enlightening people and by changing yourself through meditation, contemplation, and tapas-related stuff. This is just to give you a little bit introduction. It is about many things, the broad knowledge covers also the political stuff, economic stuff, spiritual, religious stuff, as well as science and technology, but also the old wisdom coming from the West and the East, Bharat meeting Greek. This is Dr. Maharaja Jalandhar. Hathiwala listening to BREiTZEiT, and in a couple of minutes we will have him live on the show. Three letters organizations, the famous one like the FBI, CIA, JWMO, WTO, all those BRICS, Mr. Dettelbacher writes about them. Most acts of terrorism are nowadays prepared and carried out by the various three-letter agencies and false flag attacks. False flag attacks, you remember 9/11, Yes, and let's be clear, the one major tool the elite have used to dumb down the masses and to reinvent revolutions into the same old game during the last 200 years has been the infusion of materialism and related ideas into the public mind. Infusing the public mind, materialism and related ideas. Very successful, very corrupted. The answer to this cannot be religion, for again religion is the tool of the elite, and in most instances is corrupt to the bone. Corrupt to the bone religion. The answer is in individual spirituality, individual freedom and liberty.
Tell us a little bit about, like, what is the book about?
Yeah, that's the most difficult question, because actually I wrote the book and not an abstract. I'm very bad at writing abstracts. And actually it's about the coming changes I expect to happen in India, in Europe, in the US for mostly. And these changes are basically, they affect many realms of our living, I guess, politically and society and even spirituality, maybe.
And the problem, I think, from your perspective, is that in the mass medias, people get a totally wrong impression of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the mass media are mostly owned not by the readers anymore. I mean, in like 100 years ago, probably you had at least some newspapers who were paid by those who read it. Today they are paid by those who advertise and by those who use media outlets, basically as a form of selling their products.
Okay, and you think that probably very likely because of different recent stories that you talk about in your book, the world will probably have to face in a couple of months or years severe changes, riots in some parts of the world. I think the dollar will be very worthless soon, and there could be also civil unrest. Is this a likely scenario?
Yeah, actually, some days ago you had the students protesting in Ireland over higher student fees. Today I just checked, and there was a massive protest of over 50,000 students in the UK, in England, actually. And I mean, this was expected. This is expected by even normal politicians, and I mean, there are special laws in force in many countries, in many Western countries, and they were enforced during the last years in the basically preparations against terrorism. And half of these laws are basically in place to take measures against their own citizens. No? And
dude, I tell you one thing, I'm going to university listening to the lecture because I'm senior lawyer, but I also want to keep up with the law. And so I heard this professor yesterday morning saying, what is going on, that civil rights are being cut, are being reduced to the minimum, and that the state is getting nastier and nastier. And this he said in front of all the students,
Yeah, that's at least nice if a professor at a major university stands up and says things like that, no?
And I have to say, he's very respected, Mr. Ackermann from Lucerne, very respected professor, So I think, like this book you wrote, that is like when you just come from the mainstream media, it might sound a little bit weird, some subjects. But what is the aim readership of this book? Like, what people should read it?
Yeah, actually, I mean, so your professor sounds almost like JNU. We have at least JNU here in Delhi, It's Jawaharlal Nehru University, and it's basically a communist leftist campus here in Delhi, kind of universe of itself. Of its own. Actually the book is packed with links and references to alternative media, like for instance the Swiss blog Schall und Rauch, which is of course in German, but it's not in French, not in Italian, but it's in German. And I mean, there are some alternative media, mostly privately owned, mostly non-profit. And so half of the book, at least, is a kind of reference book to these alternative sources of information, which are sometimes even funny to read, I mean, or listen to. It's like a mixture between conspiracy theory and weird stuff at best.
Yeah, well, have to say, since I met you 1 year ago in New Delhi, my horizon has quite expanded. I have seen quite a few interesting characters on the internet and stuff. And I have to say, I am like 60 pages through your book. I have to say, it is definitely good. It is readable, you know. I started, you know, looking at the Inhaltsverzeichnis, you know, seeing so many topics, but it still seems to me that you had like a red file, a red thread going to the book.
Yeah, actually, it's the book is split in two parts. It's a theoretical part and mostly philosophical part at the beginning, and then I have some practical examples in the second part, which are sometimes very entertaining, especially the one I like most is about bureaucracy and crazy written with a Z. Because there's a lot of bureaucracy in India going on. They inherited it from the Brits, and they kind of perfected it, and it's kind of bureaucracy here is. I mean, if you have an imagination of Russian bureaucracy and of Franz Kafka, then you can actually update to Indian bureaucracy now, which is
kind of a Kafkaesque situation which you are witnessing in India.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so these short stories in the second part, or it's not short stories, it's basically articles on different topics and practical examples. And bureaucracy, for instance, is one of them. If we were speaking of fascism and communism in the 20th century, basically we could start speaking about bureaucracism in the 21st century as a main enemy of the simple man on the street.
And also, you know, the main enemy probably in the mind is materialism.
Yeah, actually, but it's a very overused expression which has been in place.
Yes, but you explain this also in your book, and I have to say I have read one part of the book. I'm going to read it very shortly. People are thrown out of school suddenly and unprepared, and into the freedom of high school university life. With this abrupt taste of freedom comes the danger of getting lost in, and now it comes, Claus, excessive partying, idling, or just simply sleeping too much. When you wrote this, did you think of myself?
Well, actually, it was not a direct hint to you, Maharaja, of course. I mean, there are, of course, instances of,